good morning and welcome to AM Prime here on WESN Content Capital. My name is Keaton Shaw. I will be filling in for Mr. Andy Johnson as he is out of the country at this time. But it's my pleasure to be your host for the morning show here on WESN, the premier morning show across Trinidad and Tobago. This morning we will be speaking to Hanif Benjamin, traumatologist, as we continue our discussions surrounding the reopening of schools here in Trinidad and Tobago, and quite a bit of controversy as the tutor president has stated that teachers are ready to rest and reflect this morning. How does that play on the psyche of students who some are attending physical classroom settings for the first time and some who have been out of the classroom setting for the last 2 years? Well, we will discuss that later on in the program. And the controversy surrounding the use of fireworks following independence celebrations, well, that discussion surrounding its use, its dispensation, as well as its sale, who can handle it, who can use it. You might think there are those in authority who will be responsible for the use of fireworks, especially the aftermath. Have you ever wondered what it is after fireworks are used? What actually happens after they burst? And give us a color, an explosion of color, but then really what transpires after? Well, one of our correspondents here at WSN was able to get a clip of that. We'll show you that later on, and we will speak to activist Laura Quantrell Thomas about that situation. We'll also take a look about what's happening regionally, and we will have your Newsday poll. So we have a bit of a packed program for you this morning here on WESN. I'm Keaton Shaw once more. This is AM Prime. Let's take a break. We'll be right back after this.
Chantwell Vibes, a musical tribute to Andre Tanker, Saturday, September 24th, 2022, Central Bank Auditorium. Showtime, 7:30 p.m. Featuring Three Canal, Mavis John, Ataclan, Empress Ajay, Stacy Sobas, and panist Natasha Joseph. Tickets, $300. Available at Crosby's Music Center, St. James. Extra Foods, Arima, Grand Bazaar, and Endeavour. Online at Island E-Tickets. Committee members at 678-2843 or 482-3111. Central Bank box office on the day of the event. Mart's Liquor Palace, Diego Marte Main Road, La Puerta. A musical tribute to Andre Tanker. Saturday, September 24th, 2022. Central Bank Auditorium. Showtime, 7:30 p.m.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Site, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion.
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Welcome back to AM Prime here on WESN. As we continue the conversation this morning surrounding the reopening of schools, we wish all students the very best. As I mentioned earlier, some of them stepping into the classroom for the first time, and there are those who just have not been there for the last 2 years, and certainly will play a role on the psyche of students, of which we will get into later. But let's take a look at your Newsday poll this morning. The question is, what is your view on the call for teachers to boycott classes on Monday, the first day of the new school year? Well, the first response is the question should be what you think about the 4% increase, knowing since 2013 the only person get a raise in pay was judges, magistrates and politicians. Well, very interesting response there from that individual, not sharing their opinion on the boycott of classes, but more so on the negotiations surrounding the offer by the CPO of 4% wage increase. He's making the argument that it seems as though the only ones to have really received a salary increase are judges, magistrates and politicians, and we're forgetting those who are responsible for the future of Trinidad and Tobago, the future human resource of Trinidad and Tobago. The second response is, how much more vacation alone want? They cannot do, they care nothing for the students. They signed up to be teachers. You're going to see mixed reactions like this. And I'll be very honest with you, I share a similar opinion. Not that there is necessarily a lack of care from every single teacher as it relates to their students, but to a certain extent they did sign up to be teachers, and though everybody deserves a salary increase, considering that there has been challenges over the last 2 years for everyone and we're finally getting back to a state of normalcy, is it really in the best interest of all those involved to boycott the first day of school? Let's take a look at this third answer here. Pay the teachers and public servants their money. Gas going up again just now. Everything gone up since 2013. 4% is an insult. And very finally, settle negotiations with teachers. All over the world there's recession and frozen salaries. Are there some special bunch? What about unemployed people who are suffering and really need some government assistance due to genuinely not having a job? Look, teachers better be grateful to have a job and behave before they lose their job. Very, very interesting response, ladies and gentlemen. So whilst we do understand the need for a salary increase, and whilst there's also a general consideration by all those who have responded that the price of the cost of living has all increased, teachers have a responsibility and they should carry out that responsibility. So you will be getting mixed reviews and mixed responses to this. The negotiations will continue. Of course, teachers are not backing down. That is according to Tutor President, who is calling all teachers to rest and reflect. And by the way, that term rest and reflect, I really wonder what it means, considering that teachers have had out of the year about, what, 4 months vacation out of the year? 3 to 4 months vacation out of the year. Call it vacation. They pay their salary and they do not have to actually be on duty all the time. So I don't know, ladies and gentlemen. All I can say is that I understand the plight of the teachers. I understand the plight of the nation, with everybody wanting an increase in salary, considering the cost of living has certainly increased. But of course, the other side is, what about the children? And of course, teachers are those responsible. But as we move on with the program this morning, let's take a look about what's taking place regionally here around the Caribbean. And the first regional clip we're taking a look at, we're moving across to Jamaica. The Jamaican murder toll has now surpassed 1,000 for the year. Here is more from TVJ News.
In the meantime, the number of people murdered in Jamaica since the start of the year has surpassed 1,000. Jamila Maitland has the breakdown.
1,003. That's the number of homicides recorded in Jamaica as of August 29. It's 52 more lives taken when compared to the 951 for the similar period last year, and it represents a 5.5% increase in murders. According to the Jamaica Constabulary Force, 10 of the 19 police divisions are now seeing an upsurge in murders, shootings, and other major crimes. The St. James Police Division has so far recorded the highest number of murders, 134, followed by St. Catherine North with 99, Westmoreland with 97, St. Andrews South 88, and St. Catherine South 81. But even as firearm seizures continue to increase, the majority of crimes committed are gun-related. 741 persons have been shot and injured compared to the 765 recorded for the similar period in 2021. It's why Prime Minister Andrew Holness and other Caribbean leaders are calling on the international community to help strengthen border protection.
The challenge, of course, is managing what I call enterprise crime, criminal gangs whose sole purpose is to infiltrate state organizations, corrupt institutions, and use that power that they gain to facilitate illegal trade, whether it is narcotics coming through the trade routes from South or Central America.
And locally, it's why the private sector organization of Jamaica, PSOJ, called out both the government and the opposition to hold talks to address Jamaica's growing crime problem.
We think the government of Jamaica and the opposition really need to sit down and work that through, because this is what will deal with the short-term containment of crime. And this has been outstanding for some time, and we believe that if there is a meeting of the mind, that there can be alignment around these short-term crime containment strategies.
Investigators are also probing 263 cases of rape. Robberies are also up, as well as break-ins.
Well, Jamaica's murder toll has surpassed 1,000 for the year. The Prime Minister of Jamaica, Andrew Holness, has issued a call for international agencies to help with strengthening border protection around the Caribbean and around the region. That's very, very important, because there is obviously a dire need for it, not only in Jamaica but around the Caribbean, mostly in Trinidad and Tobago as well, considering that many a times we often hear about our geographical location, in some instances being rather unfortunate considering the drug trade in South and Central America. As it relates to the Caribbean and strengthening their borders, obviously it goes far beyond that as it relates to crime, but you saw it yourself in that news report from TVJ that the majority of crimes taking place in Jamaica is due to gun violence, and though there's been an increase in the seizure of guns across the nation, there's still a 5.5% increase in murders when compared to last year. So though we take a look around the region, it very much speaks to the situation here in Trinidad and Tobago as well, very much similar. And just bear in mind that Jamaica's population is more than double that of Trinidad and Tobago. They're close to 3 million people, and we are about 1.4 million people here. So let's take a look at what's taking place in St. Lucia. A new cassava processing plant is set to diversify St. Lucia's agriculture sector. Let's take a look at this report.
The new facility is poised to further diversify the local agro-processing industry and paves the way for St. Lucian manufactured cassava byproducts to enter the local, regional, and international markets.
My car hasn't got an FAR, but I have a lot of interest. I have a lot of interest in agriculture. So we were in Trinidad, and I had to go to Trinidad because I wanted to instill in my minister and to show the world that St. Lucia was interested in agricultural diversification. And that's why I had to come here. Because as you know, guys, the crops, the byproducts of cassava are phenomenal. I mean, I got some samples and I have some at home. The byproducts from cassava, the things that can come out of cassava, come from cassava. And I heard the expert from agriculture, Mr. Sherry, speak about cereals. That is a shortage. There's a big shortage of cereals in the world. And if we have our own cassava and our own cereals, we can do quite a bit. So this thing, what we're doing here is revolutionary.
The Prime Minister, members of his cabinet, and special invited guests were given a tour of the new facility where they also sampled cassava-based pastries. The new cassava processing plant also advances the peer administration's food security agenda, inching the country closer to reliable supplies of healthier food options.
We have to instill that kind of development in the mindset of our young people. And that comes, and we added to the fact that we can get our young people to change their tastes. To change their tastes. We know that it's many young people like, and I don't want to be macaroni and cheese, nothing wrong with it. But there's also green fig salad, and sweet potato salad, and breadfruit salad, and plantains. Local food with the same carbohydrates, but better carbohydrates, and foods that we can grow in St. Lucia, and foods we can grow in St. Lucia. We can add value to it, and we can improve the nutritional value in that food and help our young people.
The Global Environment Facility Small Grants Fund approved funding for the project.
Well, congratulations to St. Lucia. That is certainly something to celebrate. A couple of points to note from that report where the individual stated that there is a need to change the taste of the younger generation. Nothing is wrong with enjoying macaroni and cheese, but as St. Lucia inches closer to a reliable supply of healthy food options, as well as inching closer to their goal of food security and nutrition security, there's one more major step to take, and that is changing the palate of the younger generations. But congratulations to St. Lucia, and you must ask yourself, if St. Lucia could achieve something as little as this, which is so significant in the context of everything happening within the region and around the world, why is it that Trinidad and Tobago cannot achieve the same? Do you know the byproducts of cassava? Basic things such as cassava bread, cassava chips, certainly that's good. But did you know that you get lafun? Did you know that you get fufu? Did you know that you get cassava flour, starch, tapioca? There's this craze in Trinidad and Tobago now for something called boba tea, and the tapioca beads that come within it, well, that's actually made from cassava. That's a byproduct of cassava. So it's amazing that such a small initiative, and it will turn into a bigger venture very soon, but how much significance that means in the context of the timing of the global economy, the global food trade and the global food supply, and the domestic security, not only in terms of food, but also in terms of nutrition. So certainly a lot to achieve there, and very much congratulations to St. Lucia. Well, ladies and gentlemen, here on the program, we take a quick break, and when we return, well, AM Prime will continue on WESN, your content capital. Stay tuned, because this is certainly the best way to start your day.
The Guide family has been serving TNT for over 70 years. From the management and staff of JE Guide Funeral Home and Crematorium, happy independence.
Rise to the occasion with Cocky Lucky, exclusively sold at the Big Mike Wellness Center.
Number 19 Market Street in Aruka. Contact 346-26 or 338-7775.
Shantwell Vibes, a musical tribute to Andre Tanker. Saturday, September 24th, 2022. Central Bank Auditorium. Showtime, 7:30 p.m. Featuring Three Canal, Mavis John, Ataclan, Empress Ajay, Stacy Sobers, and panist Natasha Joseph. Tickets $300. Available at Crosby's Music Center, St. James. Extra Foods, Rima, Grand Bazaar, and Endeavour. Online at Island E-Tickets. Committee members at 678-2843 or 482-3111. Central Bank box office on the day of the event. Mart's Liquor Palace, Diego Marte Main Road, La Puerta. A musical tribute to Andre Tanker. Saturday, September 24th, 2022. Central Bank Auditorium. Showtime, 7:30 p.m.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
The best for your baby is at dbesttoys.com. We have the best strollers, car seats, walkers, feeding accessories, playpens, cribs, clothing, and the widest range of brand name toys like Barbie, Hot Wheels, Nerf, LOL, Fisher-Price, Cocomelon, Intex Pools, Amazon Fire tablets, HP and Gateway laptops, and the best bikes, scooters, skateboards, and ride-on. Visit us in-store at Southern Main Road, MacBean, or shop online now at dbesttoys.com. That's dbesttoys.com. We have the best toys at the best prices.
Multiple sclerosis is a chronic inflammatory condition affecting the central nervous system.
Being with someone who has MS, you have to have a lot of patience. You have to have a lot of faith.
It's difficult to diagnose until I was even in Mount Hope Hospital for about 3 weeks.
See, I'm sitting here, all of a sudden it'll feel like somebody trying to pound some needles or a nail on their foot. That is so painful.
Unfortunately, there is no cure for MS at this point in time.
MS creeps upon you. So I had one attack, and by 4 years after that, I had the second attack, and then they said yes to MS.
Welcome back to AM Prime here on WESN, and as promised, the conversation this morning, the first conversation we will be having with our guest is focused on children returning to schools. There's a lot of factors to squeeze into one discussion, but hopefully we can expand on most of them. So with me now via Zoom is clinical traumatologist Hanif Benjamin, no stranger to the program, to the station. Good morning, Mr. Benjamin. Welcome back.
Good morning, Kicharan. It is indeed a pleasure to be with you from my car, no less, but I am here.
Well, Mr. Benjamin, like many traveling in their car this morning, you're going to be stand still for a while, but we thank you very much for being with us nonetheless. Now, Mr. Benjamin, it's nothing new. We've had this conversation before, but it's very, very important that we emphasize the point that there are students who have not been in the classroom environment for the last 2 years, and there will be many who are entering the classroom environment for the first time. Let's focus on those entering the classroom environment for the first time. They have been at home. Some of them would have been homeschooled for the last 2 years. Some of them would have had online classes with teachers over the last 2 years. But knowing that they've grown so accustomed to that environment, even from the aspect of working through technology, entering the classroom now is certainly going to pose, how do we place it? Certainly it's a new option, it's a new environment, it's a new experience, but with that also comes new challenges, new stress, new forms of pressure.
So we definitely don't have enough time today to delineate this conversation, because the points that you raised is critical on so many levels, Kichan. Let me begin by saying this. One, we have not really acknowledged the terror of what the pandemic did to our children. We are very punitive in nature, and everything that we have done or have been doing is on the punitive end of the spectrum, where the fights, so they are labeled bad children and all of these things. But what we have not recognized is the trauma children would have experienced over the 2 years being at home, and whether that trauma is of a sexual nature, a violent nature, or just the trauma of the environment is important for us to consider. We have not considered that, and so the last semester of the last school year, we brought them back in a flurry, and then we were surprised with the behaviors that they came with, given the fact that we did not prepare them to return to school. Now we are in a different phase where everyone is expected to be out. Well, not today again, because you see what's going on there, another level of anxiety and trauma that our children has to be placed under today, right? And so they're coming back out, and you're talking about 2 years of online world. Now, I'm saying to a lot of my parents who come to me because of parent-child relationship issues, that 2 years is what we use as a benchmark for behavior change. Right, 2 to 3 years is what we use to say a behavior change. So for 2 to 2 years, these children were home with a device, and then all of a sudden, the device are now back as the demon. Before the pandemic, it was the device is going to spoil your eye, the device is that of the devil. It was so many things, and then we had no choice. But now we are back in real life, and now we want children to just put aside the devices. And I am saying, if we as a people have not understood the beauty of the amalgamated system, where we can infuse devices and or technology in a healthy way, teach our children to be responsible, the parents to be responsible in relation to the entire internet, you will recognize that it will be better for it. It will be interesting to see how our schools, how our parents, how our teachers use the power of the internet, having used it for the last 2 years, and how are they going to mitigate that with children who are pretty much tied to these devices.
Well, Mr. Benjamin, you raised many points there, most notably 2 to 3 years being the benchmark for behavioral change, the parent and child relationship over the last 2 years, and what that means for a transition now that they're entering the classroom environment, as opposed to being at home for the majority of the last 2 years. But also, very importantly, the failure to address the psychological and traumatic challenges that students and children would have faced over the last 2 years, considering the pandemic and its effects on the population.
I would have said,
sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, but on that particular point, now that we are re-entering this environment, do you expect some form of rehabilitation, some way of teachers actually addressing these issues, or do you just expect things to go back to how they were 2 years ago, where we sit in a classroom every day and we're just taught lessons?
You know, Trinidad and Tobago is I don't understand, because we had 2 years of changed behaviors where we saw where the pandemic, albeit horrible, brought about beautiful changes that we saw. We saw where we don't need to be on the road 24 hours to go to no office to do no work. We saw where the same work could be done from the beauty of your home, should you choose to so do. And we also saw where teaching and learning happened synchronously and asynchronously over the last 2 years. And so it's not just the children who must now reintegrate into this new world. It is a new world, and the teachers too would have been thrust into that new world. And so today we must also understand that it is not just the teachers who are doing this. It is also the administrators. It is also the parents. It is also the students. And so it is important for all the system to understand that, hey, we all need to be reintroduced into the new world. And I don't think that we're doing a good job at that. I don't believe that we understand what that means. I don't think that we understand how that works. And because of that, we're going to run into problems. You see, because we took brick and mortar curriculum and turned it into a online curriculum, and now we are bringing it back. And because we are so credentialized and all we want to do is teach our lesson, as you said, the beauty about the psychological re-underpinning, the psychological reworking of our system is left behind.
Now, Mr. Benjamin, I hear you, fair point. I give that, because certainly we focused a lot on the students, we focused a lot on the children, and you're right, over the last 2 to 3 years, teachers themselves may have gone through a behavioral change. But in the school setting, you would expect, I'm not saying it is necessarily reality or necessarily this way, but you would expect teachers to also be a support system for students. If we are to acknowledge teachers and administrators will be facing similar challenges mentally, psychologically, traumatically as children, who are the ones responsible or should be responsible for addressing the issues and also extending a helping hand to teachers, that support system to teachers and administrators?
And this is where we fall down. This is where I have a challenge with unions, right? Because union is not just to march and this. What about the mental well-being of their people? I am surprised that over the July-August vacation, this was not something that is being done on a large scale, probably on a smaller scale. Is it tutor? Is it the ministry? Who is exactly responsible for strengthening the well-being, the psychological well-being of our teachers? Who are the ones responsible for reintegrating them back into a system that has been tipsy-turvy for the last 2 years? They had a dry run last semester, last year, but we know how that dry run went, right? So now we are coming back full throttle, and today, first day of school, we have a major hiccup because we go, we don't go. So again, the system in and of itself is traumatic, and it continues to be so. Now, what is important though? What is important in this full conversation, and the thing that really moves me, that is why I lend my voice to the national conversation, because teachers have a union, principals have a union, everybody have a union except the child. And PTA, National Parent Teachers, who represent the voice of the child. And what is important to note, that in all things, at the end of the day, it is the child who receives this end of the stick that is not so clean, right? The teachers can decide to stay home if they want to and rest and relax. Can a child decide to stay home and say, Mommy, I'm feeling to rest and relax today because of the pressure that I am under? Nobody represents the voice of the child. The child has to be pushed pillar to post, right? Stay home today, come tomorrow, don't come tomorrow. We are not cognizant that the children are the ones who we are in the system for. We are the ones to protect them. And while all the unionism and all the people can rally around the teachers and the principal, and you could do all manner of things, who is helping our young people? Who is helping them to navigate the very tumultuous and difficult trauma-infested system that they are thrown into? So many of our children perform so badly, so poorly, probably not because they are poor performers, but probably the system over the last 2 years rendered them helpless, right? And we have not acknowledged that fact. We have a July booster camp foolishness, and then we had a writer test. And so who's really looking after the well-being and the mental well-being of our children? The adults, Keaton, listen to this, have developed coping mechanism over the years to deal with their stressors. But our children, they are still developing cognitively and have not developed a mental well-being that they should. And therefore, their coping mechanisms are limited to what they can do. And if the people in their social environment responses to their own stressors are drinking, smoking, fighting, partying, that is what our young people will do. But then when they do it, again, they receive the other end of the stick that is not so clean.
So all-encompassing, Mr. Benjamin, whilst we understand that the education system has evolved over the last 2 years, the system itself, has it evolved in terms of we've seen a decline in the system, or is it that we've somehow managed to maintain this substandard, under par system in which you just pointed it out yourself in the context of everything? 2 years. Today is the first day of a new academic year. We have forgotten the main reason and the main purpose for the education system and the education institution. So what you're telling me, and please feel free to correct me if I am wrong, is that though there's been an evolution of the system, it's either declined or we've maintained some level of substandard, under par system in which there's no focus on the main reason or purpose behind it.
The children. And that is the point. Why are we doing what we do? And I am disappointed today because I believe that after all this time, children are being home, the excitement of coming back to school on a first day has been interrupted because we, the adults, can't sit down in the same room and have a grown-up conversation. It is sad that on a day after 2 years of pandemic, when we are starting a fresh school term, that our children are plunged into uncertainty because we, the adults, cannot find a way to navigate our own challenges. And we do it without understanding that it is our children, right? The school is open 24 every day of the school year. Every day of the school year. And I am saying that today being the first day of school, for whatever reason, your reason, I am not knocking any reason, but I am saying that as adults, we must have taken into consideration the level of anxiety that was put into today. The level of changes. Now parents have to figure out what to do because things would have been put in place to go to school. Now they can't go to school. And I'm saying it's too early for that. We've been battling for 2 years. And I believe that it's time for us to sit down as adults and figure out how to fix this system. Because at the end of the day, the only person who is suffering is the child. And unfortunately, the child is the only one who do not have a voice.
Well, Mr. Benjamin, there will be some teachers, some educators looking at you this morning and thinking that, hold on, Mr. Benjamin, with all due respect, you're talking nonsense, because you're stating that, yes, the children don't have a voice, we have a union, but who's looking after our interests? It seems as though there's nobody that cares about our interest, our well-being, and the mere fact that, well, we as teachers, we're struggling to survive.
And be that as it may, there are mechanisms in place to deal with that. There are mechanisms in place to treat with that. And I cannot understand why the children are the ones to suffer. They are the ones to suffer. And I'm not knocking, because I am one who have always advocated for our teachers because they work hard. They have one of the most difficult professions. Their role and responsibility has morphed into so many things over the many years. But if the system remains the way it is, we will continue to spiral down into a lonely abyss where our children continue to be at the end of a stick that is not so clean, right? And until we recognize that the children are the reason for this, then we will continue to be in problems. We will continue to have challenges. And if we don't look at that, then coming back to school makes no sense. The system in and of itself makes no sense. And it is time for us to sit and have serious, futuristic conversation about our education system, what it means, how it means, and what can we do to move the system. Get rid of this SCA, right? I've said that that is a criminal exam. We need to get rid of that, find a different way to assess our children, and also infusing our schools serious after-school curricula to move our children, not just in academia, because not everybody is academically inclined. But we have a system where everybody must sit the same exam. And everybody frustrated. So as we come back into this new school year, we must recognize the psychological underpinnings. We must recognize the stressors and the traumas that our children would have gone through. And I will always speak about the children because nobody speaks. We have every union to speak for everybody else. I will speak for the children. We must put our children first. And we must be able as adults to sit around a table and do what is right for our children.
Well, Mr. Benjamin, you mentioned children, you mentioned unions, you indirectly mentioned tutor, but nothing on the Ministry of Education. Everything that you've mentioned, the Ministry of Education is centered to this.
Correct.
In your opinion, is it that there is a failure on their end as well, a complete failure? Because there seems to be a breakdown in communication. Though there was a press conference last week, there was a failure to address issues such as the negotiations with teachers and where that stands, because you know, the ministry will say, well, that's for the CPO to do, but there haven't been much input. And then at the same time, as you mentioned, the future human resource of Trinidad and Tobago.
I believe for a long time, and I've said this and I will continue to say it, I think that the system changed. We went into 2 years, no fault of the Ministry of Education. But I believe that we are too slow on the draw. We have not understood the change in times. We still operate in la la land and believe that things are copacetic. And unfortunately, pretty words cannot change the facts. The facts remain that our children are the receiving end of a horrible system, an entire system, which encompasses the ministry, the unions, the leaders, everybody. Because today is a failure on the system, right? And so when the system thinks, the leader of the system, the ministry, understanding the psychological underpinning, putting things in place, ensuring that it is timely communicated, all of those are things that should be happening, that is not happening. And we see constantly, again, a failure of the system, and the children are the ones who will suffer. I have said over and over, we have not moved. The ministry has not moved. We have not taken the lessons of the pandemic. We have not taken the learnings of the pandemic. And we have not moved from where we were 15 years ago. We are just marking time to go back to where things were. And as a country, we would have failed if we did not take the learning from what this pandemic brought in for us. I must tell you, I have to run now, though.
Of course, Mr. Benjamin, I know that you have to, but I want to thank you very much for joining us this morning. As you mentioned, not much time to unpack many more things. I had a bit more to get into, such as the cost of an education, or the price of the education system in Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, let's know about,
is the future human resource.
Call me when you have more time.
All the time.
Trust me. Even because we're talking about that, we have not spoken about the tertiary education and how the tertiary education system have not even begun to understand what the pandemic has done. Most of the international universities have now opened their doors to online world. You can now sit at home and get first class, first rated degrees. But we in the Caribbean still struggling, have to run back up to St. Augustine or wherever to get our brick and mortar degree. We have plenty to talk about the education system indeed, because it seems as if in this country, we are not moving.
Mr. Benjamin, thank you very much this morning. You raised some very, very pertinent points.
Always
all the
a
best to you, sir. And we'll keep in contact. I'm sure we'll talk again very soon.
Blessings now. Be safe. Have a good week. Bye-bye.
You too, sir. All the best. Well, that was clinical traumatologist Hanif Benjamin joining me on AM Prime this morning. He raised many, many important points, such as the fact that there are unions and there are representative bodies for administrators, for teachers, for principals, but who looks after the interest? Who's the voice of the children? At the same time, he acknowledged that over the last 2 to 3 years, there would have been behavioral changes for students. But have we also failed to address behavioral changes in teachers and in administrators as well? That is very key. The parent-child relationship is going to change once more, because we've been accustomed to being at home with one another for the last 2 years, And now as parents they've gone back out to work over the last couple of months, and children are now full-time students. And when I say full-time students, I mean they have a schedule from, some of them from as early as 5 o'clock in the morning straight up until they go to bed, because they have homework to do as well. They have projects, IAs, SBAs, papers to write. All that is there to involve. So the genesis of the conversation, you can see, is that the cost or the price of education here in Trinidad and Tobago, coupled with a failing system that has evolved. The system has evolved, because if we were able to have online classes in which there were multiple failures, that is still evolution in itself. But what we have done is that we've maintained, we have sustained a dilapidated structure, a system which is collapsing. And all of this in the end will have an effect on the future human resource of Trinidad and Tobago. We could speak about the children all we want now. We also have to think about them and tomorrow when we're not around. And we have to think about Trinidad and Tobago when we're not around, and what Trinidad and Tobago is going to be like for them. And if we are failing to do that now, then don't expect brighter, more prosperous opportunities for them tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, we take a break here on AM Prime, and when we return, well, there's a lot more to get into this morning. Stay tuned. Enjoy your cup of coffee. We'll be right back after this.
Rise to the occasion with Cocky Lucky, exclusively sold at the Big Mike Wellness Center.
Number 19 Market Street in Aruka. Contact 346-26 or 338-7775.
Chantwell Vibes, a musical tribute to Andre Tanker, Saturday, September 24th, 2022, Central Bank Auditorium. Showtime, 7:30 p.m. Featuring Three Canal, Mavis John, Ataclan, Empress Ajay, Stacy Sobers, and panist Natasha Joseph. Tickets $300. Available at Crosby's Music Center, St. James. Extra Foods, Rima, Grand Bazaar, and Endeavour. Online at Island E-Tickets. Committee members at 678-2843 or 482-3111. Central Bank box office on the day of the event. Mart's Liquor Palace, Diego Marte Main Road, La Puerta. A musical tribute to Andre Tanker. Saturday, September 24th, 2022. Central Bank Auditorium. Showtime, 7:30 p.m.
In these COVID times, things are a little different. You may have some skepticism when it comes to going to the hospital or going into the doctor because of crowds or because of so many people being present. We are now in the world of telemedicine.
Telemedicine is the innovation of using technology to treat patients at a distance.
Zakia is here today. She's going to show us a little bit of what she does as part of her at-home exercise routine. What's up, Doc? Tuesdays and Thursdays here on WESN, Content Capital.
Welcome back to AM Prime here on WESN. I'm Keaton Shaw, filling in for Mr. Andy Johnson as he is away at the moment, but taking a look as around the Caribbean, and we're continuing with the regional updates this morning. We move across to Grenada, where the Grenada government has outlined a list of strategic objectives and programs that will guide and support its transformation agenda. Bear in mind, Grenada has a new government, a younger government. Let's take a look at what's happening.
Delivering the throne speech at the ceremonial state opening of the first session of the 11th Parliament on Wednesday, Governor General Dame Cecile Lagrenade said to achieve this, government plans to address the nation's social and economic challenges, combat poverty, achieve sustainable growth, and improve the quality of life for all citizens aligned with Vision 2035. Government, she said, will focus on the holistic development of people, ensuring that they are equipped and able to produce and deliver new and improved goods and services, utilizing modern methods and techniques and generating new sources of employment and income. This includes the identification of priority areas for investment in various sectors.
My government will be driven by 5 overarching pillars. 1, citizen empowerment. 2, economic transformation. 3, governance and institutional rebuilding. 4, environmental management. And 5, foreign policy. Priorities for the first year are intended to be results-oriented, focusing on the implementation of strategic programs, projects, and policies to gain the maximum benefit from the resources that are available. Rather than making wish lists and setting overly ambitious targets, my government will focus instead on identifying priority areas for investment in different sectors. Through this approach, resources can be efficiently channeled to areas with the greatest need.
Government will also invest in making Carriacou and Petite Martinique the country's transformation hubs, allowing for pilot program testing in the areas of renewable energy and aspects of the blue economy.
Our sister isles are endowed with rich natural and human resources, and they exhibit pristine beauty. They hold rich historical roots. Carriacou and Petite Martinique are our connection to the Grenadines and facilitate the ease of inter-island travel. Thus, my government remains committed to pursuing efficient, reliable, and cost-effective transportation services, that is, airlift, including night landing, and the daily operations of the Osprey Ferry.
Grenada moving ahead with its transformation plans. Now let's take a look across what's happening in Guyana, where 20% of hospitalized COVID-19 patients in Guyana have died. Here's more from Guyana's news source.
Since the first case of COVID-19 and related death was recorded in Guyana back in 2020, the country has recorded a total of 1,278 deaths from the virus in the past 2 years. Of those deaths, the Ministry of Health has revealed that 741 of them were recorded at the Ocean View Hospital. Minister of Health Dr. Frank Anthony today explained that 80% of the patients that were admitted with COVID-19 to that hospital recovered. That revelation means that 20% of the admitted patients passed away. Dr. Anthony said the 80% recovery rate of hospitalized cases mirror the global average.
But the 80% recovery is comparable with what we have seen globally because, as you can imagine, the patients who are very sick would come to us, and especially during the Delta wave, they had lots of complications with cytokine storm and a whole set of other things that we had to deal with. So it was challenging to manage some of these patients, but nevertheless, I think we are within that global norm when it comes to COVID.
The health minister further explained that in terms of the overall figures, those hospitalized and stay-at-home cases, Guyana's recovery rate from the virus was very high.
But when you look overall at COVID-19 in Guyana, so far as of today, we would have diagnosed 71,062 cases. Out of those, 69,528 would have recovered. So basically, we have a 97.8% recovery rate overall in the country. But with our hospitalized patients, we have an 80% recovery.
Ministry of Health officials have clarified to news source that one of the challenges that medical professionals faced in the early days of the pandemic was that persons waited until they were critically ill to seek medical attention. And for many of them with underlying conditions, that was simply too late. Guyana's high vaccination rate may have also contributed to easing the spread of the virus. More than 85% of the country's adult population received at least one dose of one of the COVID-19 vaccines. More than 65% of the country's adult population is now fully vaccinated. The country started to ease COVID-19 restrictions more than 8 months ago.
Well, very key there is the fact that the Minister of Health reported that one of the challenges that medical personnel faced at the beginning of the pandemic was that patients who tested positive for COVID-19 waited until they were critically ill before seeking medical treatment. That fear of going to the hospital, where have you heard that before? Anyway, folks, let's take a break here on the program. When we return, well, we welcome our second guest on AM Prime this morning as we speak about the aftermath of fireworks, the celebrations following independence. We'll be right back after this.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
DBestToys.com. Get a Gateway 14.1-inch Ultra Slim notebook or an HP 14-inch laptop at the best prices in TNT. Get the Fire 7 tablet for $474. You can also shop the latest Amazon Fire Sticks. Call now at 32DBEST to order or visit us in-store at Forces flagship Mac Bean. Shop online now at DBestToys.com. Free delivery available throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Cash or links on delivery.
Let your voice be heard. Call Madam Fix It on WESN, the only place that effectively helps you with your woes. Having problems getting onto government agencies, water woes, NIS and pension problems, potholes, and much, much more. Call me, Madam Fix It, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right here on WESN. Let me fix it for you.
Opposite the zoo, or left for real. Can't believe what you're doing. to be international failure. Oh, they had to be mad. No, how will they could accept this, Trinidad?
How could you accept it? I mean, it's rather beautiful, and some families will see this as memories with their children, with their loved ones. But at what cost? That individual who took that video was actually directly opposite the zoo while that display went on. So joining me to have a conversation now on the aftermath of fireworks celebrations here in Trinidad and Tobago following our 60th independence anniversary celebrations is activist, a lady whom, if I may say so, a wonderful conversationalist and someone who shares an opinion on almost everything. So welcome to the program, Ms. Lara Quantrell-Thomas. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me. And you make me sound like I'm a you know, what do they say? Jack of all trades, master of none. But yes, I do like to speak out on lots of different things. So thank you for the invitation.
Well, thank you for joining us, and certainly that title is most suitable, a jack of all trades. So welcome back to EM Prime. You would have just seen that video that was taken directly opposite the zoo. Now, for months following the celebrations of New Year's, we heard from the former Attorney General, we've heard from the Minister in the Ministry of the Attorney General, we've heard from activists about fireworks displays, the sale of fireworks, the setting off of fireworks. Even the TTPS on the station spoke about that as well before the celebrations took place. And yet it seems as though it was just, well, it's not seems as though, it was just the very same.
Yeah, and I think that's the most depressing element of this entire experience, is that all of the voices and consultations and feedback from all of the different lobbying groups, whether it's animal activists, environmental activists, persons who care for the elderly, persons at the hospital and so on, all of that consultation and feedback was completely ignored. And what's really horrifying is that they moved the fireworks close to the zoo. So it's almost, well, not almost, it is an absolute slap in the face of everybody who is trying to make, not to do away with fireworks necessarily, although some of us feel that, you know, their time has been and gone. But if you are going to have fireworks, that we need to be responsible about where they are set off. And, you know, one of the best ideas I've heard, and in fact, I was talking to somebody at the Port of Spain City Corporation the night before the event, is about having fireworks like they do in Sydney and other big cities on a barge out to sea. So all across the coast, you could see it out in the Gulf of Paria, perhaps, all along Hyatt waterfront, down the coast, down central and south. And then the noise affects, you know, a few fish and maybe a few guys on the rigs. But the noise of the fireworks this year was so extreme. I've heard from multiple people living all around, obviously, Port of Spain, but even as far east and some people in central, that the noise was really terrible this year. It was the worst, the noisiest fireworks they've ever had. So it almost feels to me like whoever made the decision, and I'm not really clear who that was, completely ignored all of the consultations, the advice, best practice, and made it worse. So it was really a middle finger to anybody who cares about any of the affected groups. And let's be clear, it's not just animals. I know a lot of people huff and puff that we're only caring about the animals, and the animals suffer terrible trauma. But there's also the elderly, there's persons recuperating in the hospital and nursing homes. You know, there are so many people, children, that the loud noise terrifies. And the consistent loud noise, half an hour of non-stop barrage of noise. So I really don't know where we go from here, because clearly they are not listening to the people who are trying to improve. We want celebration. We love to celebrate. Nobody is saying you can't celebrate independence, Diwali, Christmas, whatever it might be. But let's do it in a responsible way.
We use that word responsibility, and the decision making behind it. Now, the noise is one thing, certainly is, but there's also the environmental impact. If that conversation in particular we have ignored, because we've mentioned noise pollution, but one of our correspondents here at WESN was able to film the debris left behind by the fireworks display at the Queen's Park Savannah. We have that video. Hopefully very shortly we can take a look at it. Well, these are tracks, and these are just the shells that were left lying at the Queen's Park Savannah. And I'm not entirely sure where the Port of Spain City Corporation, where the council was, for the cleanup of the artifacts. Look at this.
Now, let me just say, I believe that, and again, I don't know what the contract says, but the persons or the company that let off the fireworks, that set them up, let them off, they should be responsible for cleaning up after themselves. I walked the Savannah on, today is Monday, I think it was Friday evening, and it was actually not terrible in terms of regular citizens' waste, let's call it that, or plastic bottles. I mean, there were a few areas that clearly needed tidying up, but based on the number of people, citizens that came out for the parade and the fireworks, the perimeter of the Savannah was not as filthy and as much garbage as I would have expected. So this that you're showing now is what was left behind by the actual fireworks display, which to my mind should have been cleaned up by the people who actually did the display and not necessarily be the responsibility of the corporation. But then a friend of mine went to the farmer's market on Saturday and said it was absolutely filthy. Mm-hmm. So again, you know, different reports. I haven't witnessed it myself personally, but you know, we have a terrible mentality here of just tossing our garbage wherever. There were not enough bins. That's one thing we need to think about whenever we have a celebration of this nature, that there must be sufficient bins, recycling bins, garbage bags, whatever it is for citizens to use. But this debris from the fireworks themselves, that should be the responsibility. And there should be a penalty for whichever company put on the display for not cleaning up after themselves.
Well, certainly I can agree with you there in terms of responsibility and a penalty involved. The other side of it, you asked, where do we go from here? Because we're not entirely sure. There was consultation after consultation. Most notably, such consultations became highly publicized weeks before the independence celebrations actually took place. And bear in mind, it's a month-long celebration. Republic Day is also coming up very shortly. But to add to this, though the fireworks produced noise to our ears, noise to animals, to the elderly, to those in the hospitals, which has a psychological and traumatic effect in itself, it seems as though those in power, those in authority, will have the opinion that because there is a majority who enjoys the display, the celebrations, and this is a norm that we've seen globally, there is no wrong in doing this. It seems as though the consultations were noise to their ears. So, Ms. Quentrell Thomas, to be honest with you, as with things go in Trinidad and Tobago, there is going to be further consultation, but it's always consultation after consultation with very little action.
Yeah, it's like commissions of inquiry. You know, you have a dozen commissions of inquiry and nobody ever gets fined or goes to prison or held accountable. I mean, a couple of questions I have is, one, who is ultimately responsible for the decision, A, to have the fireworks, and B, to position them where they were positioned? I don't know the answer. I'm asking the question. It's not the Mayor of Port of Spain. Is it the Attorney General? Is it? I mean, I don't know. I'm asking the question because that person needs to be part of the consultations going forward. Why did you put them where you put them? Why did you move them closer to the zoo? Secondly, as I've said from the very beginning, nobody is saying not to have fireworks. We all love the spectacle of fireworks. But there are responsible ways to have a fireworks celebration, such as I mentioned, in big cities now, they move them offshore. It is not rocket science. I mean, I'm not an engineer, but I don't think it can be that difficult to have a flat barge with rockets and various other things on the boat so that it's out to sea. Or, of course, we've been proponents for silent fireworks or reduced noise fireworks. This year was such a slap in the face to everybody who's been involved in this advocacy. They were louder than ever. They were closer to the zoo than ever. I mean, So who made that decision? That's what I'd like to know. And what is being done by that person to that person to make sure that they don't do it again. Okay, so this is 60, so it might be 10 years before we have another huge celebration for our 70th. Although every year, I think, we have fireworks for various occasions. So where do we go now? I think the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago have to start really speaking up and understanding the challenges that this type of celebration brings. And let's not forget, this is a commercial venture. Somebody made a lot of money with these fireworks, and there are contracts perhaps in place. I don't know. I don't know what the commercial arrangements are, but those persons need to be in the consultation as well. It's very interesting. The EMA has withdrawn giving permissions, noise permit permissions for fireworks now, because it's not been able, it claims to not be able to measure the noise because it's such a short space of time, unlike a fete, which would go on for hours and hours. So we want to get the legislation passed as quickly as possible. We need advocates to move that forward. We need the Attorney General and the Ministry of Legal Affairs to be on our side. But even the legislation has a lot of problems. There's a lot of challenges with the legislation as it's proposed. And the last consultation that was held the week before Independence celebrations, a week before, none of the activist groups were able to get into the chat. Mm-hmm. It was a live stream chat. I don't know if I'm sure you guys were there. Mm-hmm. And it was a real frustration. The animal activists and some of the other groups that were involved couldn't even participate virtually. So we need to be serious about this, about all these sort of issues that affect our citizens, whether it's littering, whether it's potholes, environmental damage, whatever it might be, flooding. Don't just have a consultation for the Pappy show. As you say, we have it, we're nice, we could rack it up and say, oh, look, we've had 5 consultations. That doesn't mean anything if at the end of the day the law doesn't change, people aren't held accountable, and the practice or the behavior doesn't change. And that's something, I'm an eternal optimist, but there are some days where you just want to say, I don't know what else to do. But I do feel like this is an issue that we have to keep going forward on, because we have to become a modern, responsible country. And modern, responsible countries do not terrify animals, the elderly, the infirm, on a regular basis. That is not healthy at all for anyone.
Well, Ms. Quentin-Thomas, we have just about 3 minutes left. But for the interview, and I want to thank you for your time this morning and for sharing with us your opinion, of which I agree with many of what you've stated. But legislation in particular that you've mentioned, because there are so many other points that I'd like to focus on, but with the time left, legislation, we've realized that you can have as much legislation as you want. Mm-hmm. It's the enforcement of that legislation at the end of the day. So maybe a bill is passed, maybe a proclamation is made. At the end of the day, the enforcement is key. And you pointed it out correctly with respect to the EMA. How is it that the authority that is charged with managing the affairs as it deals with our environment here in Trinidad and Tobago and preserving and sustaining that environment is stating that, well, we can't issue permits because we're not able to measure the level of noise due to the length of time. Those fireworks celebrations were more than 5 minutes. Surely something could have been put in place.
Now, that's my understanding. I may be wrong, and I'm happy to be corrected by the EMA if I'm wrong. But I do know that they did issue a statement that they could not give out the permits for fireworks, mm-hmm. for whatever their reason. But you're right. They're tasked with, it's environmental management, companies. So they do have a responsibility for monitoring and evaluation and these sorts of things. But we as citizens, also, we live here. It cannot always be the TTPS to monitor and evaluate, or the EMA or the government, or it's always the government's fault. We as citizens have to take responsibility for our own communities. Stop buying fireworks. I mean, there are stories, many horrible stories of children being injured. I believe even recently, or a couple of years ago, a child was killed.
Yes.
So we need to take responsibility first and foremost. We are very quick to blame other people. It's never our fault. And I disagree with that. In your own home, in your own community, be responsible. If you're going to have a celebration, think about other creative ways to celebrate without fireworks. Even the bamboo bursting that we do around Diwali and that season is can be quite terrifying, but I appreciate that there's an historic and cultural significance to that. But it's not as terrifying as the fireworks. So there are other ways we can celebrate. I do think also we need to be responsible about things like noise levels when it comes to thinking about our neighbors. There are so many stories. I live in Maraval. I have many friends in Woodbrook, and I'm sure you've featured many times, the challenges of residents in Woodbrook with noise levels coming. And of course, coming up to Carnival, it gets worse and worse every single year. The residents get blasted till 4 or 5 in the morning with loud music from bars and music trucks and so on. But where's the responsibility of those music truck owners and the bar owners? Why does it always have to be, you need to call in somebody with a big stick? We have to change our behavior. We have to be more thoughtful of our neighbors and of our communities and think about different ways to celebrate. And Trinidad is a country that loves to celebrate, and I love that about Trinidad. But we must evolve to be more responsible and mindful of the people that we live with and amongst. And, I'm an animal advocate. We've got to be more mindful of our animals. And, every being on this island has a right to be here and to be safe and feel safe, whether it's 2-legged or 4-legged, with wings or without wings. And, I haven't yet seen a report from the zoo about the fireworks last week, but I shudder to think how those poor animals, reacted for that half an hour of absolutely insane noise. So, yes, the EMA has a role. The TTPS, as you say, we've got to have I can never say the word. We have to operationalize the law and have the monitoring and the evaluation and hold people accountable. But let's begin by finding out who gave permission to move the fireworks closer to the zoo. Let's start there.
Ms. Gwentrol-Somas, I think I'm going to have to make you a permanent commentator on one of our platforms, but I want to thank you very much for your time and for your opinion this morning. I certainly agree with all that you've stated, and well, I can assure you that if ever I have a topic that I need to debate to get all angles out, we will be in contact. But thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
And to you too, and a wonderful week ahead. Well, certainly there needs to be a change in terms of mindset, in terms of attitude, not only by those in authority. Very much a valid point that this blame game and this constant passing of responsibility. No, we as citizens have a role to play, and if we fail to play that role, what makes you think that those who we look up to will do the same thing? At the end of it all, let's hope that change comes very soon, because certainly time waits for nobody, and change is not going to come if we don't make it. Thank you very much to Ms. Lara Gwentrol-Thomas. And folks, as we continue with the conversation this morning, it's now time for your watch this segment. A man speaks on Caribbean diaspora and immigrant population in the United States. Let's take a look at this clip.
Rise to the occasion with Cocky Lucky, exclusively sold at the Big Mike Wellness Center.
Number 19 Market Street in Aruka. Contact 346 26 or 338 7775.
Chantwell Vibes, a musical tribute to Andre Tanker. Saturday, September 24th, 2022. Central Bank Auditorium. Showtime, 7:30 p.m. Featuring 3 Canal, Mavis John, Ataclan, Empress Ajay, Stacy Sobers, and panist Natasha Joseph. Tickets $300. Available at Crosby's Music Center, St. James. Extra Foods, Arima, Grand Bazaar, and Endeavour. Online at Island E-Tickets. Committee members at 678-2843 or 482-3111. Central Bank box office on the day of the event. Mart's Liquor Palace, Diego Martin Main Road, La Puerta. a musical tribute to Andre Tanker. Saturday, September 24th, 2022, Central Bank Auditorium. Showtime, 7:30 p.m.
Well, sometimes that's just how things go on television. Nevertheless, thank you very much to our directors. And now let's go to the Watch This segment. Just to remind you, a man speaks of Caribbean diaspora and immigrant population in the United States. Let's take a look at this clip.
Lives of people. And no one personifies that more than the Trinidadian community. You do not take from America, you give to America. You have to be on the ground to really analyze and understand the full commitment of the Caribbean diaspora and those from immigrant groups from across the globe. When businesses closed down during the height of COVID, do you know what businesses remain open? Immigrant businesses. When people fled the medical system and was not willing to put themselves on the front line, you go look at the Trinidadian Nurses Association, Puerto Rican, Dominican Nurses Association. So when I hear people say that they don't understand the fullness and how better we are as a country because of our immigrant population, they just don't get it. And we all came from somewhere, so if someone tell you to go back where you came from, tell them you will when they go back to where they came from. New York is America's city. And this Trinidadian population, the largest in America, is right here. And we all know that we're going to mash up the parkway. But it's more than that. It's what you do every day in the area of education, health, small businesses, dealing with mental health issues, law enforcement. You contribute so much to this city and country. And I'm proud to be here today at the foot of our business district to raise this flag, but also to raise our spirits. We've allowed COVID to beat us down. We've allowed us to feel as though we're not resilient. We are invincible. Our resiliency is unbelievable. And the beauty of our invincibility lies in the uniqueness of this country. This is the only country on the globe where you're told not to abandon your motherland, to embrace your new land. You were told just the opposite. Where would we be if we didn't have the diversity of the cultures all coming together to make this unique experience of a humanistic approach of how we live together? We learn from each other. You remove that from the American experience, we're no longer different than any place else. That is our secret weapon. And so today when we raise this flag, we raise our consciousness. We send a message across the country and say, Governor Abbott, you are not representative of what we represent. We're representative of inclusiveness. We're representative of being a city of immigrants and a beacon of freedom. We're representative of understanding how we come together. Just like Trinidad, we're made up of many small islands, but we have a big heart just like Trinidad. And when I was in Trinidad and Tobago several years ago, I was blown away about the uniqueness, the friendship, the caring, the loving spirit of the Trinidad people. Even when you pronounce it wrong, they still love you. And when I had to look at the first time in history bringing together 5 women deputy mayors, I looked and said, if I'm going to have the best for the human services aspect of my administration, I need to look towards the Trinidadian community, and I found the amazing Deputy Mayor, William Isom, as part of our team. So we are proud to be here together, and grateful you have brought your dreams, ambition, an island spirit here. You have contributed so much to the city, and I want to officially recognize you. So now, I have my proclamation. Now, as the mayor, come on, Ambassador, come on up. Nothing makes me look better when I'm standing next to two good-looking brothers. I proclaim Wednesday, August 31st, 2022 in the city of New York, Trinidad and Tobago Heritage Day. I, Eric Adams, Mayor of the city of New York. Thank you very much.
Well, this is where we wrap things up for AM Prime this morning. Thank you very much for joining us. You can contact us on all social media platforms or email amprime@wesncc.com. Coming up is Talking Points here with Sean Michael Small and myself. And later on, you have Madam Fix It with Miss Renata Singh. And then later on, you've got the Face of Sports with the fearless one, Andre Errol Batiste. But for now, that's it. You can join me again tomorrow morning on AM Prime. For now, have a great day, keep well, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Multiple sclerosis is a chronic inflammatory condition affecting the central nervous system.
Being with someone who has MS, you have to have a lot of patience. You have to have a lot of faith.
It's difficult to diagnose until I was even in Mount Hope Hospital for about 3 weeks.
See, when sitting here, all of a sudden it'll feel like somebody trying to pound some needles or a nail on their foot. And that is so painful.
Unfortunately, there is no cure for MS at this point in time.
MS creeps upon you. So I had one attack, and by 4 years after that, I had